The first writers in residence came to the James Merrill House 25 years ago, shortly after James Merrill's death in 1995. Since then, over 80 writers have visited, staying in his home, a National Historic Landmark, to work on projects of their own. Thanks to Merrill's generosity, the house now belongs to the Stonington Village Improvement Association and is an ongoing inspiration for writers and poets from around the world. For more information, visit our website, jamesmerrillhouse.org. Thank you.
So, hi.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Bergen. It is lovely to see the James Merrill hidden study of 107 behind you. It's very nostalgic.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks so much. So this is my new book. It's called The Math Campers.
My own novel. It's called These Women.
It looks like this.
Well, the first thing I'll say is all the dreams are actual dreams. There's nothing worse than a fabricated dream. You can always tell.
I normally don't write in first person because of the fact that as soon as you have a narrator, you tend to have somebody listening, or there's an implied audience.
I just got to soak up in the atmosphere in that house. You just feel like a writer, and you feel like you're part of this tradition and a community, and it feels like the work is important.
Magical things happen when you're looking at Merrill's books.
Well, it was a really, really transformative residency for me. It might sound like a bit of an overstatement, but it really wasn't.
Merrill's really distinct imagination was present in every detail.
Thanks, Brendan. Bye. Enjoy Stonington on my behalf.
Good afternoon. I am Ken Bleeth, and I am here to introduce Mehdi Okasi, who is the current resident of the James Merrill House in Stonington, Connecticut. I'm talking to you from the top floor of the Merrill House. Shortly, Mehdi will talk to us about and read from the work that he's been doing while he's been here at the Merrill House. And I would like to encourage you to add comments or questions. You can do this on your screen, I believe on the right side from whatever platform you're on. And those comments will be there for the duration of the talk or whenever you post them. You don't have to wait until the end. So please feel free to do that. I first met Mehdi when he was a freshman at Connecticut College. I was his freshman advisor. And if I remember correctly, he told me that he was thinking about majoring in physics. By the end of the year, or maybe at the beginning of the sophomore year, Mehdi said that he had changed his mind and that he was going to concentrate in English and focus on fiction writing, which seemed to me the better choice. Fast forward to the end of Mehdi's senior year, when, along with other students who had written honors theses, he presented a part of or a selection from what he'd been working on in his courses, which he took at Connecticut College with Blanche Boyd. And what I remember is when Mehdi was reading from his work, there was a particularly intense silence in the room. And when he was finished, there was an eruption of applause with lots of whoops and hollering from the audience. So it was a very auspicious debut. After college, Mehdi entered the graduate program of writing, the graduate writing program at Purdue University, and he received his MFA from Purdue in 2009. Since 2014, he's taught at the Purchase College at SUNY, where he's a member of the Department of Creative Writing, and he's currently an associate professor and program chair of that department. Mehdi has received numerous awards. He was a Carl Djerassi Fiction Fellow at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2011-2012, and he received an NEA Fiction Fellowship in 2016. His work has appeared in, among other places, Granta, the Los Angeles Review of Books, the Iowa Review, Best New American Voices, and most recently in an anthology entitled My Shadow is My Skin, published by the University of Texas Press. It's always a happy development when a former student becomes a friend, and so it is with great pleasure that I turn you over to my friend, Mehdi Okasi.
Ken, thank you so much for that warm introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and to have been your neighbor for these last 5 weeks, and to have really reconnected after this time away. I'm grateful to you, and I'm grateful to the James Merrill House Committee. I'm grateful to all of the kind people here who have made my stay so much more comfortable. I'd especially like to thank Bergen O'Malley, who has really been like, a sister and checked in on me every day. I arrived here under some difficult circumstances, and so I'm very grateful for all the kindness that have been shown to me. Furthermore, being in this space has been incredible. There is truly a sense of magic here, and that's not hyperbole. I feel like I arrived here kind of wounded, and my time here has helped me rediscover the joy of writing, the play of words, and there are happy ghosts here, I should say. So thank you to everybody, and thank you for all of you who are taking time out of your day to watch this and to be here tonight. So what I'm going to do is just give you a brief introduction about the novel that I'm working on, and I'm going to read a section which functions as the prologue. It was the seed of this whole book, and so that will sort of give you a sense of the novel that will follow. So May This Be Your Last Sorrow is a braided family saga spanning 5 decades of political drama between Iran and America, from the Shah's White Revolution to Khomeini's 1979 Islamic one, from the 2003 US invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan to the 2009 Green Movement in Iran. The novel explores how the political drama between nations strains the personal bonds of family and friendships, the love between mothers and sons. The story follows the lives of 3 young teachers, Aziz, Mariam, and Haide, whose strong bonds of friendship are tested when they gamble their homeland for freedom, unaware of the high costs that will ultimately challenge not only what they know about themselves and one another, but of their sons who come of age in America to question the burdens of their mother's love. Through the thick of political revolution to the domestic immigrant experience of America, the novel asks, what must we do with the burdens we didn't ask for? How is it that we drive our loved ones away as we try to bring them closer? So what I'm going to do is read, like I said, the prologue, and all you really need to know that it's set in a suburb of Tehran, a town called Karaj, and the year is 1984. It's March. It's about a week or so away from the Persian New Year, which falls on the first day of spring at the moment of the vernal equinox. Soon as the early bell frees them for 2 weeks of Nowruz holiday, the boys race to the football field, sideline their backpacks and jackets in a heap, then huddle at center field for a head count. Because they are the oldest, Mohammed, 14 years, 5 weeks, captains for Team Persepolis, and Sina, 13 years, 10 months, for Team Istiqlal. Altogether, they are 16 players for the first match of 5 for the championship. Their mothers don't begrudge them this small happiness, which life will rob them of soon enough. And yet, other mothers don't relent, calling their sons directly home for spring chores, walls to scrub free of marks, garden beds to till, rugs to drag out and beat free of the past year's dust, spread awash in sunlight. Each boy must take stock of his belongings, mending what ought to be mended, donating only what he would be happy to receive, and disposing of what cannot be salvaged. As they near the first day of spring and the earth revives herself, so must they also reflect on past and future intentions, the order within equally as important as the order without. But there's still time enough for all that. Today, Captain Mohammed and Sina do their best to reassign the players equitably, and it is the most beautiful of negotiations. Team Istiqlal wins the coin toss. Captain Sina kicks off. The soil here was once dark and smelled of good earth, grass soft to the touch, but the field has fallen fallow, and little can grow here anymore. Their game dizzies up clouds of pale dust that coat their brows and grit between their teeth. Many blame this too on the war. Captain Sina assigns his little brother Erfan to the position of goalie, where he will be out of the way, but not before hyping the position's import. Little Erfan spends the time that they do play in a steadfast stance, legs set wide apart, arms extended, palms facing out as if perpetually signaling everything to halt. With the game underway, the boys forget the holes in their t-shirts. They've learned to play with barefoot or in plastic sandals or sneakers inherited, maneuvering quickly to slip one back on. In their imaginations, the field is FIFA green, the white markings straight and bright, their names emblazoned on team jerseys, each boy donning his favorite player's number. Crowds fill the stadium. Their cheers block the pinging of pots herded room to room when it rains, or Baba rasping for the heart medicine he can't afford, or Maman drowning her tears at the kitchen faucet, though they avow not to go hungry. But here on this field, the boys are kings, mounting zephyrs of imagination, the ballooning squalls of pride. So enthralled are they in the game that they don't hear the vans until it's too late. One moment they're vying for the ball down right field, sweat streaking their faces and running into their ears, and the next soldiers in faded green fatigues are shoving them inside 2 vans. The dust hasn't even resettled before they peel off again, throwing up more earth in their wake. 3 soldiers guard the rear doors of the van with captains Mohammed and Sina and goalie Erfand inside. Slick with sweat and to keep from slipping, they claw at any hold as the van lurches through traffic. A black makeshift curtain makes silhouettes of the 2 men up front, driver and another with a portable radio that crackles like a bonfire. There are no windows on this side of the veil, and so the boys can't see the second van or even their direction. A few of them hide their faces in their hands, but not little Erfan, who'd been keeping goal for Team Istiqlal. He faces the soldiers and shouts, surprising everyone, "This was a championship match, for God's sake." Sina pulls his younger brother close and whispers for him to keep quiet. "But they ruined our game," Erfan whines, staring daggers at the soldiers. How suddenly they were usurped. The green-eyed soldier snickers as he removes his cap, rubbing a freshly buzzed head, the white of his scalp visible even in the Stygian light. He exhales hard enough to sputter, then drops his chin to his chest so that for a moment the boys think he's about to apologize. A dog doesn't recognize his owner. He speaks softly into his chest and then is silent a beat, 2, 3, before finally looking up, his pupils two fat cockroaches that crowd out his green irises. His smile widens to bare teeth, then a low growl that degenerates into barking. The boys all startle. Erfan recoils against his brother's chest. The soldiers laugh. The boys watch the soldiers laughing. Green Eyes winks at Erfan, who, swayed by his brother's heartbeat, squints meanly but says nothing. In the stillness that follows, the boys float off into some void. Muhammad wonders whether they are also trying to pray because Toro Khoda is all he's able to muster as far as he gets. Toro Khoda, O God. It's the only possible vocative word, past, present, future, encompassing all Muhammad cannot articulate because it is hidden of and from himself and of fate. He closes his eyes. Toro Khoda trusts that repetition transmutes the word into prayer, and the darkness ripples, and he's looking into black water at the bottom of a well and through to their fathers rushing the field, followed by their mothers, who spin in circles and tear their sons' names into every direction of the wind. Toro Khoda, they are screaming, bring them back to us. But the field gives no answer. Only the congregation of their backpacks and jackets forlorn by the sideline, the ball adrift at center field. Are they able to read the dirt and understand? Can they feel their blood rushing away? Inside the vans, the soldiers are restless. They splay their legs wide with their rifles between, fingering some part. Unshaven, uniforms stained at the collars and fraying at the hems, they smell of end-of-day socks and talk about their hometown girls, imagining the lives they will build once they return. Don't know about you two, but I've got prospects when I get back to Hamadan, Green Eyes says. What kind of prospects? The fat soldier asks, digging in his ear with a key. You think I'm simple-minded like a Turk? I'm not telling you. Ha, the fat Turk laughs. He inspects the key, then wipes it across his thigh. You guys from Hamadan are all the same, thinking you're better than everybody. Probably you don't even have a prospect, just showing off. I do indeed have a prospect and don't think you can trick me with your Turk ways, Green Eyes says. I know your kind. If a donkey stood stock still in the middle of the street, you'd heat its ass with your own breath to get it moving. Cut it out, the third soldier intercedes. He's wiry and wears a pair of crooked eyeglasses, taped at both hinges. In his front breast pocket, a miniature copy of the Quran. Can't you just agree that he's got prospects, he says to the fat Turk before turning to Green Eyes. And can't you just accept that Turks are craftier? Oh, the guy from Isfahan is foxing in, the fat Turk says. You Isfahanis are the worst of all. You'd have us beat each other senseless and then steal both our prospects. Under his breath, so that only Muhammad can hear, Sina whispers, but they don't even sound like soldiers. Eventually, the sounds of traffic abate, and the van croaks into second gear to climb a slope. The boys go rigid against the pitch. Taped hinges and Green Eyes hold open the doors once they park, but the fat Turk remains seated, forcing the boys over his splayed legs. Muhammad squints into sunlight wetted by snow, inhales needling cold. Sina follows. Erfund hesitates but jumps before Green Eyes can lift him down, falling to all fours. Woof woof, Green Eyes laughs, then waves forward the next boy. Here, at the foothills of the snow-capped Elburz, Persepolis and Istiklal are reunited, shivering without jackets as they're led along a promenade, past rows of plane trees and hedged gardens, young beds of red and white tulips erect despite the cold. After the third ornate building they pass, Muhammad flushes with a feeling of deja vu so intense his head whirls. What is it? Sina asks. But he can't say until they round a row of cypress trees and the white palace comes suddenly into view. Straight away, he recognizes it from a book in teacher's private library, knows they're at Sadabad complex, a complex of some 18 palaces in the northernmost part of Tehran, originally built by the last of the Qajar kings who ransomed Iran to Russia and England before absconding to Europe with the country's wealth. Faced with Iran's disintegration, a Cossack colonel named Reza Khan marched his army to Tehran and seized the capital in 1921, overthrowing the corrupt government and reinstating Congress, which 4 years later declared him Shah, first of the Pahlavi house. Inspired by the royal palaces of France, Reza Shah commissioned the White Palace for a summer residence. It took 5 years to construct and another 3 to furnish, and officially opened in 1939, affording him 2 summers before Russia and England, threatened by his nationalist movement and Hitler's growing power, invaded, occupied, and forced him to abdicate, permitting his son to succeed the throne, although he, too, ultimately suffered his father's fate. Betrayed by their allies, both men died in exile, the father in Johannesburg, the son in Cairo, the father from a heart condition, the son from cancer, exactly 36 years and 1 day apart. You read all that in one book, Sina asks, squinting up at the column of 2-story pillars. Teacher trusts Mohammed to be discreet. The principal burns unsanctioned books, never reads them first, doesn't even know what he's burning. But Mohammed trusts Sina, and only God knows if they'll ever see teacher again, or books. You see it all, Sina says, his tone strung between the poles of wonder and disbelief at Mohammed's photographic memory. The soldiers prod them on, and back in step, Mohammed sees teacher's face, apple-cheeked and dewy, bruising at the news of their disappearance. On her last visit, she brought 4 kilos of lamb, rice, oil for cooking and lighting to petition his parents yet again. Allah had blessed Muhammad with a tremendous gift. He was the brightest she'd ever taught and must continue on to upper secondary, then university, then inshallah medical school, maybe even in America. If they permitted, she'd subsidize whatever he'd earn working manual labor, because of course she understood they had 4 mouths to feed, 3 dowries to raise. Embarrassed by teachers' generosity and unable to deny her, his parents once again answered, as they always did, whatever is God's will. But in private, they argued about dignity, how long to depend on her charity, what would people say. How would anyone know? Muhammad pressed. Maybe you think our neighbors don't have noses, Maman said. They can't smell the meat I fry. You think they're happy not to have the same? Remember, Muhammad, after every good thing you got in this world, some evil eye is burning, and only Allah can protect you from it. The boys are told to wait at the building's north entrance. The soldiers saunter off to smoke with another troop under the plane trees. The boys turn to the palace's broad northern stairs, and to its west notice 40 or so older boys milling about a bronze statue of 2 legs inside riding boots. Irfan starts in their direction before Sina catches his arm. But I want to see, he whines. Sina looks at Muhammad as if to say, what now? But Muhammad is distracted by the statue, severed at the thighs, maybe only 3 meters tall now. Why leave Reza Shah's legs behind, and how and what of the rest? They're here, a lanky boy alerts the others who follow him. Although not in uniform, they are dressed uniformly in loose-fitting dress shirts and baggy charcoal trousers, 18 or 19 years old. Sina and Muhammad step forward to meet them. Ma'ali Reza hastum, bache mashadum. It takes them a beat to decipher his accent. I'm Ali Reza from Mashhad. They shake hands, his fingers long as a pianist's, his eyes walnut in size and color, overwhelming an otherwise narrow face, pulling them into his orbit. They'd been anticipating them all morning, Ali Reza continues. Lieutenant Commander had explained all about them, young revolutionaries following in the footsteps of their national hero, 13-year-old Fahmide, martyred at Goramshar to save his entire troop. With a single glance, Mohammed and Sina confirm what the other is thinking. It would be foolish to correct Ali Reza's impression. No choice but to play the roles into which they've been cast. But Fahmide was a child of Qom, a holy city, Ali Reza says, and you're all capital boys. While he won't name names, some of the others doubt whether a mujahid as brave could be found in the capital, where most people were in love with the West. But believe them, I didn't, and now here you all are. Karaj is not the capital, Irfan charges out between them to face Ali Reza. It's 1 hour by car, but more with traffic. Sina holds on to his brother's shoulder, but neither squeezes nor pulls him back. And Baba says we are the number one in the world for traffic. Didn't you know that? Ali Reza smiles down on Irfan, then glances up at Mohammed and Sina, says, I have a younger Dadash too. Of Irfan, he asks, ever been on an airplane? Nah, Irfan shakes his head. I have. You know what the earth looks like from up that high? How high? Ali Reza turns to the Elbours and points out at Mount Toshal, the tallest visible peak. I'd guess we were 3 Tochals high. Oh, Irfan no longer fights against the real. Let me ask you a question. Ali Reza crouches to level with him. Mohammed and Sina hold their breath. Do you think the angels in heaven see our borders? Irfan looks up at the sky. Of course not, right? Because that is something people invented. The only border God cares about is between the lands of the believers and unbelievers. Do you understand? Irfan nods. Ali Reza stands back up and tussles his hair. His pea couldn't put a hole in snow, someone scoffs, and the others laugh. Really, someone else says, he can't even reach Reza Khan's riding boots. Irfan hears the inherent challenge, shakes free of his brother's hand, and pushes through the crowd and up to the statue. He kicks off his dusty sneakers, which once belonged to Sina, and faster than any of them think possible, mounts the trunk of Reza Shah's legs. Mashallah, Ali Reza cheers. Better watch out, kids. This little mujahid will outrank us all. He gets everyone chanting, capital boy, capital boy, capital boy. Irfan, thrilled by the crowd's attention, shakes a victory clasp above his head, left, right, left. Suddenly, the junior lieutenants are barking for them to fall in, scattering the boys like fruit flies. Green Eyes shouts for Irfan to get down. Quick, you little shaitan, sounding more amused than angry. He holds out his arms, and this time Irfan jumps into them. They maneuver into 3 rows at the base of the wide staircase at the palace's northern entrance. In the front line, teams Persepolis and Istiqlal square shoulder to shoulder, and only then do they notice the senior officers watching them from the landing above, dressed in dark green fatigues with stylized badges stitched to their shoulders, caps in hand. The officer with red insignias sewn to his lapel descends a step, then signals taped hinges on the ground, who issues the salute command. Esteemed Brigadier General Nouri. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Brigadier Nouri begins. Allah suffices as witness. We did not start this war. Never were we the aggressors. This war was imposed on us, and as good Muslims, we do not shirk our sacred duty to fight the oppressors and defend the innocents. Neither are we weak nor afraid to stand up to our enemies. And as I look on your faces, you, our brightest lights, the very best of young men, I know our mission is pure and that God Almighty supports us with divine strength. For indeed, these are dark times. And although victory is not assured, we do not lose faith. We are steadfast, patient, and follow the footsteps of the infallible Imams. Just as our beloved Imam Hussein martyred himself for his faith, fighting the armies of the villain Yazid on the fields of Karbala, so too will we fight the infidel Saddam and retake that holy city. Imam Hussein's blood was not spilled in vain. He knew that it is better to die than to live under persecution, and so grew the Shia faith. For us, every day is Ashura, and every place is Karbala. This the unbelievers don't understand. Love of this world blinds them. But we love death as they love life, for we know that true life is in the hereafter. Now, some of you are younger than others. He looks at the first row and rests his gaze on Erfand. But age does not matter on the battlefield. What matters is your lion heart. The enemy will not show you mercy because you are young, nor will they show your mothers and sisters any mercy because they are women. The infidels will violate them. But every one of you would die before letting them harm even a single hair on your mother's heads. You are the guardians, shields of the faithful, and you are brothers in Islam. So banish fear from your hearts, because on the battlefield, fear will get you killed. Redouble your courage by Allah's remembrance. Support one another in body and spirit. Everything good comes from Allah. So pray for his help when fear threatens to steal your courage. God will bolster you on the battlefield. He will strike fear in the enemy's hearts. His angels will descend to fight alongside you, just as they did for God's prophet at the Battle of Badr. He turns then to look up at the White Palace. Once, this place sheltered the deviators, men seduced from the straight path by devilish promises. But with his Islamic revolution, our supreme leader has purified this place and driven the deviators out. Wherever Imam Khomeini is, the faithful flourish. He turns back to look at them. So tonight, we give thanks to Allah for you, our mujahideen, with a sofre from which none may rise hungry. May this food strengthen your souls as it nourishes your bodies. But first we pray. So come, enter, and give thanks to God. Inside, the great halls astonish. Ornaments of gold and silver adorn. Crystal chandeliers big as a Peugeot redouble jovial light across vast rugs that pictorially weave their heritage from mythical through Islamic age, from Susa to Persepolis, Qiyamaz to Shah Ismail I. Muhammad's eyes are drawn to the center of one particular rug, which depicts the mythical Simurgh as a composite of 30 distinct species of birds. Many are one is many. After their ablutions, the boys file into one of the formal ceremony halls and line up behind the officers facing Qibla. Brigadier General Nouri leads the prayer. Afterwards, they eat around one sofre in the adjoining hall, platters of rice and skewers of saffron chicken and beef kubide, charred tomatoes and peppers, stacks of lavash, melamine plates heaped with herbs and feta, dates and walnuts. Each boy is given the choice of an orange or black soda glass bottle, all his own. They eat with their hands, using the bread to soak up the juices, every last grain of rice, and serve themselves seconds. After tea and cookies, the sofra is cleared and the boys are led downstairs to another large hall and handed a pillow and blanket. Tushaks are stacked in several piles, so Persepolis and Estiklal arrange theirs together in a corner of the room, leaving just enough space between them and the older, so that the older boys, so as not to cause offense to the older boys. Stretching out on either side of Erfand, Mohammed and Sina close their eyes. What do you suppose our parents are doing now? Sina whispers when the others have drifted off to sleep. The sound of their collective breathing, a weighted blanket. Mohammed turns on his side to face him, the whites of his friend's eyes scarcely visible in the dark. The entire town must know by now. Neighbors failing to console their mothers or helping their fathers search door to door because surely someone saw something. Chided for asking where he's gone, his little sisters are left alone to wander into the deepest reaches of imagination where monstrosities are devil-born. They're probably searching with the police, Sina continues when Mohammed doesn't answer. But police don't scare the Basij. They'll always be doubting because we didn't say goodbye. The thought occurs to Muhammad as he utters it, almost as if he sees the future and their beloved's eyes darting at every intersection, never giving up the search to find their faces in the crowd. Between them, Erfan's breathing deepens, the faintest whistle as he exhales through the gap between his front teeth. And for my parents, double, Sina says. And Mohammed realizes he means because they are two, him and Erfan. It hadn't occurred to him to compound sorrow that way, though of course it makes sense. Erfan mumbles in his sleep, his eyeballs roll, upwelling his eyelids, which open an eerie quarter slit, making visible the whites of his eyes. Mohammed thinks he's having a seizure, but Sina, rising onto his elbow, stays calm. This happens when he's dreaming. With his free hand, he rubs soft circles across Erfan's chest. It's strange to see, I know, like he's half in this world and half in another. Baba says it's because he's loath to miss out. He thinks we're all having fun without him. Erfan's murmurs sink into deep breaths, although his eyes remain semi-open. I wish I could see what he's dreaming about, Sina says. Sometimes he even sleepwalks. Maman says when we go to sleep, our spirits fly up to God, who sends us back for each waking until our appointed time. On our way back through space, we sometimes stop on other worlds, and that's why you see what you see in your dreams. I didn't know that, Sina says, slowly withdrawing his hand from his brother's chest. Do you ever remember yours? He settles back against his pillow. Sometimes. Mohammed doesn't say more because people suspect his dream recall just as they doubt his photographic memory. They are silent a long moment before Sina whispers, Mama never says it, but I know Erfan's her favorite. Every morning before school, she makes me promise to watch over him. And right now, I know she's crying for him most, and if anything happens to him, his voice breaks. Mohammed doesn't have to look to see his friend's tears. He reaches across Erfan for Sina's arm and squeezes. We'll look after him together, he says, but he's a wild one, so it'd help if we had some rope. Sina snort chuckles. Mohammed feels along his arm for his hand and holds on. Sina exhales a long, shaky breath and squeezes back. Do you think they'll give us rifles? Mohammed asks. And Sina yawns, a response he doesn't catch. And then Mohammed yawns until sleep overtakes him too, his arm draped across one brother's chest, holding still the other's hand. They are woken at twilight for Fajr prayers, then a simple breakfast of sugary tea, bread, and butter. As they eat, one of Nuri's deputies reviews their itinerary. At 0700, they will board a coach for Desful, a distance of 666 kilometers from their current location, where they will join ground troops engaged in the dawn operations. Their objective: to cut off the road from Basra to Baghdad, a major arms and supply corridor to their southwestern border. The commanding major in Desful will brief them as need to know. They are then dismissed to use the washrooms, gather any belongings, then reconvene by the bus. As Muhammad exits the washroom, the fat Turk, who is speaking to a short man in a gray suit, beckons him over. Muhammad tells his teammates to go ahead. So, this is the famous Agha Zamanzadeh. The way he pinches his family name raises the hairs on Muhammad's arms. Concealed in a handshake, the suited man slips the fat Turk folded bills, which he promptly pockets and returns upstairs. I've heard much about you, but your reaction tells me you haven't the faintest notion who I am. His salt and pepper mustache nearly obscure his bottom lip. Nothing about him suggests a military man. His speech circuitous, his tone bureaucratic, an air of self-import to compensate for his short frame. For instance, I know you're ranked first in your grade. Your mother's name is Parveen. Your father's name is Ahmad, works construction, although given his poor health, who knows how much longer. You have 3 younger sisters, 9, 7, and 5 years old. Shall I tell you their names? It's not a question, but Muhammad shakes his head nevertheless. The man's white dress shirt is buttoned at the collar and a size too small, making him look slightly strangled. You are surprised, shocked, dare say, meaning teacher never advised you of our certain meeting. His gabled eyebrows arch higher on his eggy forehead. Looking into his eyes is like looking under the hood of a car. Oh, but you mustn't regard me like that, Muhammad Agha. I did forewarn, avowed in fact that this day would come. Blame rests with teacher. She never did believe me a man of my word, never thought me serious. And so here we are, in a circumstance altogether avoidable, had she but heeded. Well, nothing to be done now, but as a final gesture of my goodwill, is there any message you'd like me to convey? He draws a blank. What is even possible to say? What is this man even saying? But he does want to say something to let teacher know. The man is watching him carefully, relishing in his distress. Is he her husband, brother, uncle, father? Then suddenly it comes to him. Teacher's last book loaned, still in the living room cabinet, cover illustration of a dog sled team, single lead, pulling an insulated man through the whirling Arctic cold. He'd planned to return it after Nowruz holiday. On the last page of the short story about a man who needn't have died alone in the Yukon, he reads the sentence he can so clearly see in his mind's eye. When he returned to the United States, he could tell the folks what real cold was. The suited man scowls, opens his mouth as if to ask for clarification, and decides against it. He straightens his back and rebuttons his jacket, touches his buttoned collar. I suppose you think you're clever having me pass this code. It's no code, Muhammad says, which of course isn't exactly true, only a story. Because at this point in Jack London's tale, the unnamed man knows he's dying from hypothermia. Even then, he was outside of himself, standing with the boys and looking at himself in the snow. Confused, his spirit at the threshold between worlds, he thinks of returning home to disclose an observation so unremarkable what real cold was, that Muhammad heard in it that man's stunning lack of imagination, his profound loneliness, because who was even waiting for him back home besides some anonymous folks? Had he the chance to discuss the story with teacher, he would have said he so badly wanted for the man at that moment in the story to look forward into the unseen rather than confusedly retreat. It felt like watching a ghost being born. I suppose that it's of no consequence, the suited man says, especially where you're going. He repeated the sentence. Trust I will relay it to teacher. Now, you better hurry. You don't want to be left behind. The boys are lined up single file at the bus, his teammates near the head. Everyone watches Muhammad take his place at the end of the line. The sun is low. The sun is now bright in the sky, the swell of birdsong at dawn having stilled to less fervent and more sporadic chirping. Though Muhammad's heart hammers at his chest, the others are somberly quiet, as if not truly awake. Brigadier General Nuri and his lieutenants survey the line from end to end. He steps forward and holds his right hand up in the air. Here in my hand I hold a golden key, he begins. Each of you will be given one to wear around your neck. Do not lose these keys. Do not give them to anyone, for should you fall on the battlefield, these keys will unlock the gates of heaven. With these keys you will enter paradise where gardens abound and sweet rivers flow. His lieutenants work their way from either end of the line, placing the chains from which the keys hang around each boy's neck. Know this, should your body be broken and your blood spilled, it will only water the generations that flower after you. Your soul will fly. It will return from where it first came. Remember, even the smallest among you can find the strength to change the course of history. Muhammad is the last to pass beneath the Quran, which General Nuri holds aloft. He takes the first step onto the bus, then turns back to kiss the holy book that the general lowers for that expressed purpose. On board, Ali Reza waves Muhammad to the rear, where he saved the window seat next to his. Dadash, did something happen? It is but a fleeting instant, seeing himself through Ali Reza's eyes, his jaws clenched, shoulders tight, unblinking, scraping raw the cuticles of his left thumb with his right. He pulls his hands apart. Alhamdulillah, Muhammad says, turning both palms skyward as the engine roars awake. As the bus pulls away, the commanders turn back to the White Palace and the boys watch their retreat. Taped hinges stands at the front of the bus and calls for a collective salavat. From the back of the bus, Ali Reza recites first and loudest, O God, send blessings upon Muhammad and the progeny of Muhammad. His voice forges ahead, rolling up others into a froth that breaks forward. Overhead, clouds cover the sun, dimming the light inside the bus, and Muhammad recalls the unnamed man in London's story who died not having seen the sun for days. As the bus winds down the mountain, sunlight scatters through the clouds, needles widening into quills, then beams, then trails that shine pathways from the heavens down to earth, but vanish into the serried, darkling cumulus above. Muhammad looks down at the key nestled against his chest. He takes it up in his right hand. It's much lighter than he anticipated. When he scratches its surface with his fingernail, the gold paint flakes. Thank you. That's the end. I went a little long there. Sorry, Ken.
No, that's fine. We have a bit of time. Thank you so much. We have a couple of questions posted, but I'd like to be selfish and ask one of my own first. It's a question about audience. That is to say, some writers, when asked, say they write for themselves or for their own pleasure. But it seems to me that any writer at some level must have thought or be thinking about who his or her readers are likely to be. So my question to you is, to what extent, if at all, a consciousness of a possible audience for your book shapes your choices as you write? I mean, do you have an ideal reader, for example? So
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I mean, yes, because you know, my family was refugees to this country, and growing up, and just the process of living, I always felt in that position of translation, of trying to make meaning and and trying to explain context. And so when I write, I mean, in my mind, I have an American reader as audience, right? So someone like me whose best friends growing up were books. So I don't write particularly for an Iranian audience, and I don't write particularly for women or older people or whatever. I don't think of it in that way, but I do think of it in terms of what do people need to know, and how can I communicate that in a way that doesn't burden the story, so that keeps the story going ahead. But as you're reading, you begin to understand some of the history, just the language. When I first started writing, I was very much, I wanted to recreate Farsi, the music of the language, in the actual writing. And my mom had said, good job, but too much Farsi. No one's going to understand it. Like, take it all out. Which, to be fair, was good advice, but so it's always sort of negotiating that a little bit.
Right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Another comment says, asks, could you tell us about your research practice? Seems to me you could go in a number of directions with that.
Oh my God, yeah. That's actually I think my favorite part of being a writer is the research. I mean, I could research my whole life. I'm at the point right now.
Then you wouldn't get to write your novel.
Then I wouldn't get to write. Yeah. Well, it's one of those. It's a great way to procrastinate, right? But I just genuinely, really, really love learning about new things, and I love the sort of the avenues it takes you when a question happens. Like, this entire novel started with like one thing I read, which was that which is the narrative about the Golden Keys, which is during the Iran-Iraq War. They relied a lot on the young voluntary soldiers, were called the Basij. But at certain points, when it became a war of attrition, they needed more troops, and so they went to the poor areas of Iran and they kidnapped kids from fields, and they would give these kids gold keys that they painted gold, and they would say, these keys will get you into heaven, and they used them, these child soldiers, to clear minefields. And that's obviously going to be the fate of these boys. They don't know that yet, but with just that little bit of detail, this whole thing opened up. And so yeah, so I think I do too much research, but it is my favorite part of all of this.
Right. What you say about the detail of the keys, Henry James, when he writes about his fiction, talks often about having his word is a germ, from which the story, some detail, which then in the fullness of time produces the work. And it sounds like the Golden Key was perhaps something like that for you.
Exactly. And it's been so great to work here, because the kernel, like the kernel of the kernel, right? The seed of all of this book was this moment, was this image. And I've been spending a lot of time sort of thinking about the work that this opening needs to do, because the novel spans 50 plus years, and it moves between Iran and America. There's a lot of history there, from the White Revolution to the Green Movement, and so it's felt kind of coming full circle in a way to like rework some of this now, knowing where the story has gone. So yeah.
in a way, you've already answered another of the questions that's posted. Someone asks, talks about how the transitions among your scenes seem seamless, and asks how, if you would speak about the sequence, how that beginning at the field came forward and onward. But in a way, you've talked about how that scene, was in your research, but also you decided to put it at the very beginning, and generated what was to come.
Yeah. I mean, I initially, part of this story was in a short story I wrote, called Salvation Army, and it was sort of this juxtaposition between the story of these boys and then the teacher, right? The teacher and her son's story. I, Part of the writing a novel is thinking about momentum and urgency, what's going to keep the reader reading, and so I've had to play around a lot with that, and so the aim of, like, I think whoever commented on that, thank you. I think that's the goal, is to make it seamless between scene and summary, between interiority and exteriority. And I think that only kind of happens with revision, many drafts.
Right.
And I aspire to that. I aspire to a novel that will keep the reader turning the pages, but that also, that also makes them pause in moments, with language, with image, with figurative language. So
Yeah, I'm interested. I mean, you had sent me a print copy of what you just read, so this is my second time through, but I found myself interested in the matter of details, specifically what kinds of details you choose to keep in or add, and what kinds you may, in revision, leave out. And I'll give you one, maybe two examples, both of which I thought were wonderful details. When you're talking about the food, the meal that's served to the boys, you specify that the food is on melamine plates. You didn't need that, but that adds something quite wonderful to it. And perhaps similarly, when Erfan kicks off his sneakers, you say that they had once belonged to, sorry, the name escapes me.
brother Sina.
Again, that you didn't need that detail, but adding it adds something to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I've revised and written so much that I think about the ways in which details will echo throughout the story. So the melamine plates are there because it's going to become important later, because one of the very tangible desires of who we learn is the teacher, it was a childhood dream to eat off of china, right? She used to listen for the sound of neighbors eating off of china, and the sneakers, very much this idea of following in footsteps. I wanted that echo of that image for the American boys, who you meet later on in the novel. I wanted the reader, to be thinking about that. Why these boys, and why did they survive whereas the others did not? And what does it mean to follow in the footsteps of not only, heroes, quote unquote, or religious figures, or but what it means to actually try to understand, right, what it means to go through something in a way that's tangible. And I think there's an intimacy there, right? There's an intimacy in wearing someone else's shoes. And so I wanted that, I wanted to sort of stress that, because one of the things the novel explores is real loneliness in America. And you see such intimacy and hopefully in the scene, such love between these boys who for whom in this culture, there's nothing wrong with holding hands. They have no concept of this notion of masculinity that we do here in Western culture. And so I wanted to, and so to answer, this is a long way to say that I do think the work of details should echo and rebound throughout the larger story. And so, yes, a lot gets cut, but the ones that I hold on to, hopefully, do that work.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you're saying is that ideally a detail at the beginning of the novel will somehow embed itself in a reader's consciousness or catch the reader's eye without having any knowledge that it will in fact echo later on in the story, but it will. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, alas, we're out of time. Again, Mehdi, thank you so much. And it's been wonderful hearing the first part of the novel that I and others are looking forward to reading when it's finished.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ken. Thank you to everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
So, hi.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Bergen. It is lovely to see the James Merrill hidden study of 107 behind you. It's very nostalgic.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks so much. So this is my new book. It's called The Math Campers.
My own novel. It's called These Women.
It looks like this.
Well, the first thing I'll say is all the dreams are actual dreams. There's nothing worse than a fabricated dream. You can always tell.
I normally don't write in first person because of the fact that as soon as you have a narrator, you tend to have somebody listening, or there's an implied audience.
I just got to soak up in the atmosphere in that house. You just feel like a writer, and you feel like you're part of this tradition and a community, and it feels like the work is important.
Magical things happen when you're looking at Merrill's books.
Well, it was a really, really transformative residency for me. It might sound like a bit of an overstatement, but it really wasn't.
Merrill's really distinct imagination was present in every detail.
Thanks, Bergen. Bye. Enjoy Stonington on my behalf.
The first writers in residence came to the James Merrill House 25 years ago, shortly after James Merrill's death in 1995. Since then, over 80 writers have visited, staying in his home, a National Historic Landmark, to work on projects of their own. Thanks to Merrill's generosity, the house now belongs to the Stonington Village Improvement Association and is an ongoing inspiration for writers and poets from around the world. For more information, visit our website, jamesmerrillhouse.org. Thank you.